If you're an aspiring podcaster and you've been struggling to grow your podcast, grow your audience, and grow your brand, this video is just for you. My name is Terryl Humphrey. Over the last half a decade, I produced over 893 podcast episodes while helping 17 entrepreneurs launch their podcast with confidence. And the biggest thing that I've learned while podcasting, helping others with their podcast, is point number one. To grow your podcast, you have to have a way to grow your podcast. So this is a great episode. This is a phenomenal episode. Get ready, because if this is your first time, we're going to dive deep on how to grow your podcast in less than 90 days. So get your pen, get your notebook, and let's get it started. So let me share my screen. First thing first, there we go. Let me put the screen back in the screen so you can see the screen that I'm going to be working on. So when I started podcasting a half a decade ago, I picked up my phone, I picked up a tripod, and I started with what I had. Okay? When I started with what I had, my tripod wasn't even tall enough for me to even record the video. I had a small tripod and 3 books underneath it, and it still was short. I tell you this, it's not the fact that the podcast wasn't working, it was more so that I had to commit to the process. I had to commit to the journey. I had to commit to my growth. When I started to understand that I was helping others build their confidence and really pursue what they wanted to do, my whole thought process changed. It changed because it taught me something. I'm not just helping people with their podcast. I'm not just helping people be consistent with building their brand. I'm not just helping others get comfortable on camera. What I've learned is that I'm helping others find themselves. Okay? I'm helping others find themselves. And with this method, hold on, there we go. Find themselves. And when you go and find yourself, see, through podcasting, you can't grow your podcast if you don't understand who you are serving. Point number one is that you have to identify who you are serving. Before your podcast grow, before your impact grow, before your brand grow, you have to understand who you are serving. Who's your customer? Who's your ideal customer? There's a terminology called ICP, ideal customer. Hold on, ideal customer profile. In other words, what does this customer look like? What does this customer sound like? What is this customer talking about? See, our ideal audience are multifamily investors who invest in more than 200 doors. Those are that's my ideal customer. In addition to that, on a grand scheme of things, on a big scheme, is that my audience is entrepreneurs. Excuse me. The people I'm serving is a small niche, which is multifamily investors. In addition to that, the page itself is around entrepreneurs, business owners, people who are building their own brand. You see, my niche is small, but that doesn't mean that my content can't impact many people. You see, when I start to understand who I was serving, my content starts to change, my podcast starts to grow, my brand started to increase. Hold on. My brand started to be different. It started to be different because I became different. Right? So when you identify who you are serving, you got to serve them in a language where they understand. Many times when I started to understand about podcasting, I'm like, man, like, what am I actually doing? At first, I thought I was building culture. And I didn't even know what that even meant. I didn't even know that didn't even mean that. See, it was so confusing when somebody asked me, so what do you do? I'm like, great question. We help organizations build their culture through podcasting. And then they would look at me. And then they go on to the next topic. You see, it was so confusing to me because I'm like, man, I just explained who we serving. We're serving organizations to help them build their culture through podcasting. Like, what does that even mean? See, I was trying to figure out what it meant when I was going out there to pitch myself. You see, to grow your podcast, you have to speak in the language that where your customer understands. As I start to narrow down my communication and start to communicate in the where people can actually understand me, when I start to shift it, at first it was like multifamily syndicators. Or syndicators. I think that's how you spell syndicators. And they'll look at me. And I'm like, what am I saying wrong? You see, the language helps others identify who you are serving. Right. So when I started to understand, like, okay, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the problem. You see, failure's knowledge talks about the failure. What is the failure? The failure is that I wasn't speaking the language where people can understand what I was talking about, who I was trying to serve, and who I can help. Okay. As I started to put myself out there even more, I failed. That failure wasn't bad, but that failure taught me what to say. That language taught me what to say. Hold on, they don't look like what? Hold on. That language taught me what to say. What am I saying? You see, I'm saying that there's so many different things that I can say, but I shouldn't be saying it because people don't understand what I'm talking about. You see, it was so challenging for me because I'm like, man, I think I got it. Like, I think I figured it out. And now it's like, well, now that we have ideal customers, how do we help them? We bring the podcast production to you. We remove all the stress, all the equipment, all the know-how. Before I even started today, before I even started the podcast today, I took a picture. I was like, man, this setup is crazy. You see, before the setup, before the investment, before me updating my format, updating who I'm serving, you see, I was committed. Before you grow, you got to commit to your podcast. I started to commit to my podcast, and when I start to interview people such as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers COO, other executives, other leaders, other thought leaders, other entrepreneurs, as I'm interviewing and having a conversation with these phenomenal people, I'm learning that they have something in common. They have focus. You see, they have focus because they are focused on a task. They're focused on a goal. They're not all over the place. No. They're so clear on the customer that they are serving, and they go above and beyond to serve their customers. Shout out to Dr. K. Go above and beyond. It's not just doing what you think is good. It's doing your best for the customer that you would like to serve. Now, the reason why I talk a lot about failure is because you have to fail to understand what you're doing. I failed so many different times. In fact, when I was in the third grade, I got my first D, as in devastated, on my report card. And I thought my mom was gonna whoop my butt and give me I was afraid. Nevertheless, I understood that I was really learning how to go through the process. Then one day my mama told me, she was like, son, you gotta do better. And from that moment on, I'm like, ooh, all I gotta do is better. It's not the fact that I failed and felt like a failure. It's more so I had to learn how to pass. I had to learn how to communicate, had to learn how to identify who I was serving. I can't serve everybody. Shout out to Action Zone. I can't serve everybody, so I need to serve somebody. They say if you're trying to serve everybody, hold on. Everybody equals no one. Everybody equals, no one. So I was trying to figure out, like, who am I serving? How can I go about serving them? And then over time, I start to figure out my customer. Over time, I start to figure out the language. Today, in fact, I'm improving the language, so it's simple enough to understand that I'm helping multifamily investors who has more than 200 doors build their brand through podcasting. As simple as that sounds, it was hard to get here. It was challenging to get here. Nonetheless, I understood that I was getting somewhere. So to grow your podcast, point number one is that hold on. Let me just go back to it. Let me go back to it. Hold on. Point number one is that you have to identify who your customer is. Who are you serving? What problem are you solving? And how are you solving that problem? Point number two is this. Point number two is that you have to commit. I talked about this in the last podcast. And I tell you, it's not just about growth. It's not just about increasing your numbers, increasing your awareness, increasing the amount of people who's listening to your podcast. It's more so about committing to the process. Commit to the process. The process is what stops a lot of people from succeeding. See, when I started half a decade ago, I was like, I knew I wanted to do something. So I'll come upstairs when I get off work, I go home. I'm blessed. Somebody say Jake from TikTok say I'm blessed the life of the first 5 people to message me. Oh, he trying to promote something. You have to commit to the process. When I was in the Marine Corps, I committed to the process. Every day I got off work, I went upstairs, I sat down, put my phone up, and I started to record. You see, that process was like this. I'm here. My tripod, you see, at this time I had a tripod that was tall enough to a point where it can go eye level. But I'll tell you this. The only thing that's different from today and half a decade ago is this: knowledge. I understand more about the business of podcasting rather than just podcasting for fun. So over time, I was learning how to do the business. And this right here was the old format. Dog culture, what's going on, bro? It was the old format. It was the old format because I'll tell you now, I'm doing the same exact thing, but I'm just doing it a little bit differently. I'm taking notes. I'm bringing you along the journey. I'm documenting the process. I'm explaining the growth. I'm demonstrating the growth. I'm talking about the growth. Why? Because the growth is something that people have to see, have to learn, have to experience. You see, I can't be here today if I didn't start a half a decade ago. This right here was 2021. In this format, I literally had a table, same table, and I had my phone, and my phone was right there, just recording myself. As I recorded myself, as I got better, as I improved what I was doing, and as I improved my communication, how I was helping others shifted. Okay, it shifted because I started to understand more about business. It shifted because I started to understand the problem that I was solving. It shifted because I learned that I was in business. I wasn't just creating content. In other words, I was marketing myself. When you commit to the process, when you commit to your podcast, you're not just talking just to be talking. You're not just talking just to be talking. You are literally marketing yourself. You are literally building your brand. You are literally putting yourself out there. What happens is that as I started to do all these different things and produce over 893 podcast episodes, and then I start to help others launch their podcast with confidence, it's not the fact that I gained the knowledge of 893 podcast episodes. It's more so that I developed a format. Format equals growth. format equals growth. And I tell you that it took me a long time. Half a decade, 893 podcast episodes later, helping 17 people launch their podcast, and I made $412 so far. That alone, hold on. That alone taught me that growth is possible. Growth is possible because I have to learn how to market myself. Growth is possible because I have to learn the problem that I'm solving. Growth is possible because I have to do it consistently. You see, when I committed to the podcast, when I committed to Failures Knowledge Podcast, I literally committed to the process. There's so many different things that I didn't understand. In fact, I didn't know how to sell. I didn't know how to market. Sell, market, follow up, cold call, cold outreach, CRM. Know about CRM? CRMs are customer relationship management. What else? Data reading or something like that. You see, it's not just the fact of podcasting. It's that when you start to put yourself out there, you're in business. Growth comes from having a commitment to your process. Your podcast brings in more people. Your podcast attracts more people. But for me to grow a business and become profitable, had to learn who I was serving, the problem I was solving, and how to go about solving this problem. And that's why we bring the production to you, because it took me 5.5 years, over $70,000, $70,000. Hold on. $70K. Let's see if it stayed the same. Okay. And that's negative. I didn't make that. That's negative. Okay. To learn about business. And it took so long to get to a point where I understand the business that I'm in. You see, it's not just about creating content. Nah. It's not just about having a podcast. Nah. It's not just about putting yourself out there. It's literally about solving a problem that you can solve consistently. You see, when I committed to the podcast, when I committed to the process taught me about business. Now I'm in school for business management. I've attended 4 different programs for entrepreneurship. And I was talking to my wife earlier today. I was like, in all honesty, like I'm doing the same exact thing that I was doing half a decade ago. And as I started to recognize, I was like, wait. I'm doing the same thing, but there's a twist to it. The twist is the business development. I had to be developed. My business mindset had to be developed. My business concept had to be learned. My business, understanding, had to evolve. So it's not just about the podcast, it's literally about everything that happens after that. I did a podcast yesterday, and it was a new format that I did. The format that I did was I started with the brand first, with failure first, and I was nervous because I was used to waiting to talk about the failure. But then, in the beginning of the conversation, we talked about it, but it gave me a different shift. It gave me a different understanding. I was like, wait, in order for me to be different, I want to already talk about failure a lot. It's not that I'm a failure. It's just that I'm learning from the failures. When I started to understand that, and I was like, there's something here. That conversation yesterday taught me that there's something here. What's here? What's here is the concept of being okay with failure. You're not a failure. You just got to learn what you're doing. Sometimes what happens is meant to put you in a different position. But before you get in this position, you got to commit to the process. You got to commit to the process because the process is a commitment away. Every day, I got committed to the process. Every day, I learned something new. Every day, I apply something new. Every day, I grew. So Rigo, what's going on, bro? So to grow your podcast, you got to commit to the process. Because when you commit to the process, you're the one that's growing. Ooh, hold on. It's kind of like a little seed right there. Hold on. You got a little seed right here, right? And in this seed, you got the dirt. This right here is called the dirt, right? You got the dirt. But then underneath it, this seed that was planted don't look like nothing's happening, right? But see, what happens, what I started to understand is this. One, I was growing publicly. Like, I'm literally putting myself out there in a public manner. Like, every time I'm going live, every time I'm recording, every time I'm publishing, like, I'm putting myself out there live, right? Here's what happens. As I start to do that, something starts to happen, right? Something starts to happen, but before I see the results, something is happening underneath the surface. Something is happening when I'm not on camera. Something is happening when I'm not on live. Something is happening as I'm developing. What's happening is that I'm building a foundation. Hold on. Found. D-A-T-I-O-N. I think that's how you spell foundation. I'm building a foundation. Why? Because the roots underneath the foundation has to be strong. The roots are education. The roots are problem to solve. Hold on. To solve. The root is developing systems. The root is commitment. The root, hold on, is consistency. I don't know if I spelled consistency right. Nonetheless, let's get back to it. You see that seed right here? That's the seed that it starts with. D Blake, what's up, bro? That seed is what it starts with. But when you grow yourself and you develop yourself and you understand what you're doing and you evolve, you're building a foundation. When I was stationed in Southern California, I was doing real estate wholesaling. Excuse me. And as I was doing real estate wholesale, I remember going to this home that needed renovation, and it was really bad. It was really bad. So we went to the back. We did the walkthrough, but we started at the back. There was a big old tree. Like, this tree was huge. This tree was so huge. Hold on. This is just a tree. They don't look like a tree, but tree. Okay. This tree was so huge. The house over here, let's just say this is the house. The house was leaning because the roots in the tree was leaning against the house. And so as I'm there, I'm confused. I'm like, how in the world is this big old tree making the house lean or making the house tilt? Or, to be honest, I don't know how to explain. It was a big tree and the roots underneath it was making the house tilt. When I saw that, and the people that I was with that was explaining, yeah, like, yeah, you're gonna have to cut this tree down because this tree is growing so much that the house is tilting, and to get it level, you gotta remove this tree. That means you gotta buy and spend money to. It was advanced. It was so advanced. I'm like, what is you talking about? I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't even understand. I can't comprehend what you're talking about. You see, I tell you this. That tree had some strong roots. That tree had a strong foundation. But the house can handle the foundation that it was on. Hold on. In other words, the tree that had the roots was unleveling the house. Why is that important? When you have roots in your business, when you have roots in yourself, when you have education in yourself, when you have the problem to solve, when you develop the systems, when you commit to the process, when you have consistency, you are building a strong foundation. See, to grow your podcast, you got to commit to your process. To grow your podcast, you got to commit to your growth. To grow your podcast, you got to commit to your development. And as you start to do that, your roots creates results. And results are ways to have a business. That's the last point I'm going to hit on. Last point is that your roots create results. And hold on, just to recap, point number one that we talked about was that you have to identify who you are serving, ideal ICP, your ideal customer profile. We are actually helping multifamily investors build their brand through podcasting. And then the second point that we talked about is that you have to commit to the process. You have to commit to the process. And as you are committing to the process, you are developing. Last point that we're going to talk about is that you have to, what is it called? You have to adjust. You have to adjust. Throughout the half a decade and 893 podcast episodes and helping 17 people launch their podcast with confidence, I've had to adjust so many different times. In other words, pivot. My business model wasn't clear. The problem that I was solving wasn't clear. The solution definitely wasn't clear. But what I tell you is this: the adjustment helped me understand how to do it more effectively. And at first I was doing advertising, like we was helping people with their advertising. And then when I go out and I put myself out there and I go pitch, and people are asking me like, what does that consist of? Are you helping people with their advertisements? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. They was like, are you doing their social media marketing? And I was like, yeah, I think so. They say, are you creating flyers for people? I said, yeah, I think so. My mentor, shout out to Action Zone, they pulled me to the office. They talked to me. They said, Terrell, you didn't say no to anything. I said, say no. I said, I thought you were supposed to say yes to everything. You see, yes leads to somewhere. Somewhere. But multiple yeses leads to nowhere. Hold on. Leads to nowhere. Why? Because you didn't say no to nothing. When I start to understand more about business and the problem that I was solving, I was like, I need to learn how to say no to some things that I'm not going to be able to do. Saying no equals focus. When you're focused, you are aligned. When you're focused, you remove distractions. As you are focused, you understand what you are doing. It took a long time to understand what I was doing and why I was doing it. Recently, last couple of years, we're going to entrepreneurship program. Shout out to Spartan Incubator Program. We just finished that one. Shout out to Action Zone. Finished that one. Shout out to Kaiser University. Going to school for business management. And it's learning the vocabulary behind the business. It's learning the terminology behind the foundation. It's learning the know-how to understand what I'm doing. So when I focus, I learned how to grow my podcast. Focus leads to growth. Focus leads to commitment. Focus leads to you and your podcast growing. Now, when people ask me, "Hey, can you come and record this certain type of thing?" And I'm like, if it's not a podcast, I can't help you. I can't help you because I'm not a videographer. Videographer is not a podcaster. And I had to like shift my perspective, shift my mindset, because I'm thinking just because I have a camera, I can record a lot of things. But I had to be careful because when I start to record a lot of things, people were asking me to record a lot of things. But I'm like, nah, man, like I do podcasts. Like I only do podcasts. If you have a podcast, or if you have an idea for a podcast, I can help you with that. If you have a certain type of video that you want to shoot and want to have the effects, that's not my lane. I found my lane. I found my lane. And I'm going to stay in my lane. So you never understand what you're doing, but when I start to understand how to do it, I was like, oh, this is different. Because now I have a way to do it. I have a format to communicate. I have a process to follow. Whereas if I was doing all different things, I wouldn't be able to focus. So that's why this is important. To grow your podcast, you have to, what did I just talk about? Hold on. To grow your podcast, you have to be okay with adjustments. Like you have to understand that you have to pivot, you have to change, you have to evolve, you have to grow, you have to learn, you have to implement, you have to apply, you have to adjust, pivot, and the cycle repeats over and over and over again. So to recap everything that we talked about in this video on how to grow your podcast is this. Point number one, identify who you are serving. Identify your ICP, your ideal customer profile. Ours are multifamily investors who invest in more than 200 doors, and we help them build their brand through podcasting. Point number two that we talked about was that you have to commit to the process. Everyone has a starting phase. Everyone has a starting journey, but you have to commit to the process in order for you to understand what you are doing. And point number three that we talked about is that you have to adjust and be okay with pivoting. Be okay with changing. Be okay with evolving. Be okay with learning. Be okay with growing. Be okay with just changing your business model overall. Because you never know what you're going to grow into, but you have to grow through it to understand who you're becoming. So if you got value from this, really enjoyed this, make sure you hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button, because this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about tips around podcasting. In addition to that, going to start doing behind the scenes content around what it takes to have a successful podcast, what you can start implementing, what you can start applying, what we are doing at Failure's Knowledge, and what you can do for your podcast or your company as well. So last thing, don't be afraid to fail. Because failure is knowledge. I appreciate y'all, and I'll see y'all on the next one. That was good. That was really good.